Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Reducing Summer Melt in the Age of COVID. First, FCAN would like to thank the National College Attainment Network for their generous support of this webinar. I'm your FCAN host today, Kathy McDonald, Assistant Director for Network Partnerships with the Florida College Access Network. And my co-host today is Bill DeBon, who's Director of Data and Evaluation for the National College Attainment Network. Joining us today to share some of their great summer melt strategies are Christian Granlund, who is manager for Puget Sound College and Career Network, located at Puget Sound Educational Service District. His work focuses on facilitating post-secondary transition partnerships between K through 12 and college partners. A warm welcome also to Dr. Carlo Silbinger, who serves as the Director of College Going Culture for the Partnership for Los Angeles Schools, where he works with teachers, counselors, administrators, parents, and community partners at all 19 K through 12 schools to support students in preparing for and transitioning to college after graduation. Finally, I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to Dr. Jeremy Raff, who is coordinator of College and Career Services at School District of Lancaster, where he works to increase access to opportunities for students from low-income households. Now, I'm going to get us started with some housekeeping items, get those out of the way first. First, we welcome your questions. You can submit those at any time. We always look forward to hearing what's on your mind. You should be able to enter those in the question box, which you should see in your dashboard on the right side of your computer. If you don't see that, click on the little orange box with the arrow in it, and that'll open up your dashboard. Second, we look forward to seeing what's resonating with you on social media. So please share kind of the key things you're hearing that you're taking away from today's webinar. Finally, we are recording this webinar, so this and all the materials associated with it will be available to everyone who registered within 1 week of the recording. Now, I know we've got quite a few people who are new to FCAN and our work, so very briefly to give you a sense of who we are and what we do, our mission is to lead the collaborative movement to ensure every Floridian achieves an education beyond high school and a rewarding career. Our vision is to see a Florida working together where education is the economic pathway to mobility for all. We do our work in 3 primary ways. First, through our local college access networks, which are cross-sector coalitions of leaders collaborating to remove barriers and provide more support for student success, some of which you'll hear about in examples today. Second is FCAN publishes research and data on evidence-based practices and policy opportunities to strengthen Florida's talent pool. Finally, FCAN coordinates 4 College Ready Florida initiatives that provide schools and community organizations free resources to help students continue their education after high school. Our work is guided by our 7 conditions for success, which you can find out more about on our website. Today's webinar offers great examples of many of these conditions, particularly clear information and guidance, effective use of data, and community collaboration. And with that, I am going to turn today's webinar over to my co-host, Bill DeBon. Bill, thanks. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you to FCAN for hosting this webinar. Thank you to all of our attendees for being here. And perhaps most especially, thank you to our 3 panelists who will be graciously sharing their knowledge about summer melt with you shortly. So I am Bill DeBon, Director of Data and Evaluation at the National College Attainment Network. And if you're not familiar with NCAN, we are a member association based in Washington, D.C. Our 500 members across the country come in all shapes and sizes and types of organizations, but our through line here is improving access and attainment outcomes for students from low-income backgrounds, first-generation students, students of color. Our members provide all kinds of services to students. NCAN in turn provides membership services to those members around best practices, cutting edge strategies, kind of some of those, like those you will hear today around summer melt. We do data analysis, specifically around FAFSA completion, for example. And we also advocate at the federal and state levels for policy changes that would make access and attainment easier for students. Wonderful. Oh, Okay, so you can see our presenters here. And so our goals today, you can see them on your screen, are that you will walk away from this webinar understanding, either understanding in general or understanding better the concept of summer melt. We will explore together 3 approaches to addressing summer melt. We will leave plenty of time for Q&A and comments at the end of the webinar so that we can listen to your pain points and where we can address them here today, we will do that. And where we can't, they may inform a future webinar, or we may be able to follow up with you offline. And then, of course, we also want to hear, what is on your mind related to summer melt, and what strategies are you using in your communities that may be helpful. Just a quick thumbnail sketch, sorry, to backtrack on the NCAN piece. So you can see NCAN's vision, mission, and strategies here. Our vision is that all students have an equitable opportunity to achieve social and economic mobility through higher education. Our mission is to build, strengthen, and empower communities and stakeholders to close equity gaps in post-secondary attainment for all students. And we do that through building network capacity, advocating for policy solutions, and supporting systems change. So before I turn it over to our panelists, just a quick note about why we see summer melt as being so important, and why reducing it, especially in the age of COVID-19, is so important. So in a lot of ways, reducing summer melt is a way of increasing kind of return on investment for all the efforts that we put in around student success. When we are teaching students, we're advising them, we're setting them up for success after high school graduation or otherwise, all that effort sees a return when students actually matriculate and realize their post-secondary pathways. And so when students melt over the summer, we're seeing declines in those students' opportunities. We are seeing them shift away from pathways that they otherwise aspire to. And we are seeing communities, states, and the nation overall miss out on the benefits of their eventual educational attainment. Summer melt is really important to NCAN. It's one of the 4 strategies that we really hold up for districts, schools, and community partners to focus on. The other 3 being increasing access to financial aid through FAFSA completion, incorporating fit and match into post-secondary advising, and then doing all of these things kind of through a data-driven lens. So you will hear 3, I think, pretty distinct approaches to reducing summer melt here on our call today. I am super excited to hear from and learn from our panelists. And so without further ado, let me turn it over to Christian Granlund. Christian, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Kathy, for having me. My name is Christian Granlund. I'm a manager at Puget Sound College and Career Network. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about some of the work we did last summer to support the class of 2021 and what we're planning on doing last summer for the class of 2020 and what we're planning on doing for this summer with the class of 2021. So our work in facilitating those partnerships and looking to support post-secondary transition for our students. So let's see. So a little bit about Puget Sound College and Career Network. We're located in Puget Sound Educational Service District with our main service areas being King County and Pierce County. So if you're not familiar with Washington, that's the Seattle and Tacoma areas. We work to build regional capacity to increase post-secondary readiness by cultivating and engaging a diverse network, including students, educators, community organizations, schools, districts, colleges, state-level organizations. And we do that through professional learning opportunities and resources, providing coaching and technical assistance, support in piloting new programs and new innovations. We look to build systems alignment. Lost the slides.
Okay, well, let's try to get them back.
Making sure it wasn't just me.
Nope.
My apologies. Let me go back to sharing my screen. Oops, it's not letting me. Hold on.
Here you
Let
go.
me.
Sorry about that, Kathy. Here you go.
Awesome. Okay. Sorry, folks. Let me switch this back. All right. Okay. Are we on poll question, Christian? Do you want
When
me
you
to
go
start?
back one slide, we're almost there.
You got it. Sorry, everyone.
No worries. So just wrapping up this piece, just kind of clarifying some of our work. You know, we really take pride and take focus on leading with racial equity in everything we do by really intentionally addressing opportunity gaps, facilitating shared ownership, leadership, and engagement of students, families, and communities of color. And we're committed to removing barriers for first generation, low income students of color so that they have the opportunity to access and obtain post-secondary credentials. So that's just a little bit about our work and what we do. All right, and now we're on the poll question. So just to get us started, we wanted to hear a little bit from you. What is your organization's biggest barrier to collaborating with local partners? Is it your capacity, your partner organization's capacity, or maybe your perception of their capacity, lack of a moderator, different priorities, maybe you don't know, just have no idea where to begin. And if none of these apply, if there's a chat box, I believe you can enter things in there. So would love to hear kind of what are the things that are stopping you or slowing you down from building and working with local partners. And when I say partners, I mean districts, colleges, and CBOs.
All right, let's give that a couple more seconds. Okay, let's go ahead and close that out and share the results there.
Great. So don't know where to begin, and your own capacity. We're all stretched super thin right now. So hopefully sharing a little bit about our work, we'll understand how working together can help kind of increase our bandwidth and actually make work more efficient and more effective, and also find some access points of how to begin conversations with partners. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate the feedback, and that's really interesting to see. So thanks. Next slide. All right. So what I want to share a little bit about is the work we did last summer. So when COVID hit last year, we were all concerned about the impacts that it would have on our students. And like I'm sure many others were trying to figure out once COVID hit, what role were we going to play in helping support our students and address this? So there was, you know, I'm sure folks remember there was such an influx of resources, of landing pages, and you know, we considered doing some of those things, but that wasn't necessarily our wheelhouse. Our wheelhouse is bringing folks together and helping facilitate these partnerships. So that's what we landed on. That's what we do best, and that's what we began with this work group last summer. I'm going to provide a little bit of an overview of what that was, and then Kathy, we have a link to a blog post that explains some of the work. So if you could add that to the chat, that would be great. So what we ended up doing was facilitating our post-secondary transition work group for the class of 2020. This consisted of two separate partnerships. One partnership was one district to one local, their local community college. Another partnership was in Pierce County, and it consisted of 4 different districts and a mix of 5 CTCs and colleges in the area. So a much larger group. So we kind of had different dynamics with those different groups. Coming into this webinar, I was even unsure of sharing this example because at the time it felt reactive, it felt messy. We were just kind of learning as we were going. But we learned so much in the process that we felt it was important to share those learnings that did happen last year, and it was a great foundation that we built kind of going into this summer. So with such a large, diverse group of districts and colleges, Strategies varied from summer bridge programs, regional information sessions, communication strategies for dual credit learners, and then building on summer outreach and advising. So we go to the next slide. So just some of what we learned undergoing the work group. The big lessons were about our process as well as the strategies we implemented. So as I'm sure folks here are aware, one of the challenges with Summer Melt is that the work doesn't necessarily belong to the K-12 sector, doesn't necessarily belong to the college sector. So a lot of our focus was around facilitating those partnerships and relationships so that roles were very clear, they were reciprocal, mutually beneficial, and were able to address the immediate needs of students. So, you know, it might seem obvious, but first lesson is building in ample time to learn about partners and students. In the shorter time frame that was last, you know, COVID hit, classes were canceled, we kind of came back in spring. In that shorter time frame, we had to be really strategic about what strategies we chose to implement. And then we actually, in the process, we ended up learning about existing resources at colleges, existing programs. And in that, so folks who have concern about capacity, we were able to learn about programs and just leverage those programs that already existed. So it was just small amounts of coordination to support things that were going on. So an example of this, one of our partner colleges was piloting a summer bridge program. The program was credit bearing. It didn't require financial aid or tuition and didn't require placement. So it was a super low barrier access point for students to get connected to. And if we hadn't just sat down with them and had the conversation, we would have never known about it. You know, our main role was just really, you know, the college needed to get students to be able to run that program, and the district had students who needed that support. So just really simple like recruitment and outreach and advising process to get students into that support program. Our next lesson was building relationships that explicitly support student handoffs. Being in a virtual setting, we place an emphasis on scaffolding specific handoff points. Every piece of communication had a clear call to action or included a connection to an adult staff member with a formal introduction who was then accountable for follow-up to that student. So in everything we were doing, we were embedding that follow-up and that relational handoff point. So that was a huge priority for us, especially regarding concerns around students being virtual, being isolated. The relational aspect of it was a huge emphasis. And then next, we utilized existing data. You know, under a short time frame, we didn't have capacity to build in new streams of data. So looking at financial aid statuses, utilizing exit survey data, and utilizing dual credit earner data. In regards to student support, our big lessons were around acknowledging the expertise of students and student-facing staff. We really focused on letting our practitioners guide the work and guide the strategies. They were the ones who knew the shortcuts in the system and allowed us to streamline any process or scaffold any process to support students. So an example of this is we were able to get students directly connected to financial aid staff, and even in some cases for the summer bridge program, we were able to extend their financial aid deadline. So they had the knowledge of the system to be able to do that.
Christian, one of the folks was asking whether you'd be willing to share your exit survey. Is that something we could share after the fact?
Yeah, it was a little, so some districts had exit surveys of their own. Some we do have a template we could share. I think I recall NCAN having a template too. So we can try to I'm sure get you a template to use.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. And then this last piece, you know, again, just emphasizing the importance of exit surveys and how useful those were. Some districts had them, some didn't, and the difference it made for those districts that had that information around intent and progress was so useful in us targeting our energy on those students who needed support. So those last two really go hand in hand. So can't emphasize how important that is. All right, thanks. All right, so what we're taking with us going into this year, again, we don't have the constraints around time that we did last year, so we're starting early, and especially knowing the time constraints that our practitioners are under. Starting early is allowing us to be more methodical in our process, and it allows us to be more accessible and easier for our participants to engage in the work, because it's not a huge time crunch. It's not crisis mode like last year was. Totally recognize last year was very much that feeling, and we wanted to do the best we could for our students. But starting early this year was a big priority. Even if now you're thinking, what can I start in the couple months of school that we have left? Think about scaling. What can you do effectively in 2 months? And maybe it's a pilot or a test for something you implement for next year. So even with the time you have left, there's still a way to scale it and be methodical and disciplined about how you move forward with that work. Next is establishing a defined facilitator role. Obviously, our role is facilitators, so we think this is important. But even if you don't have that resource of having a facilitator, co-create that facilitator role with whoever you're partnering with. Define those norms, define the priorities beforehand, and really define the scope of work, so that as ideas move, that facilitator role. I know for us, our priority this year was clearly defining what our role was and what it wasn't. Because like I said, last year we were trying a lot of things, and so this year, again, being able to be much more methodical about who's accountable for what work. Let's see, and then this may not be as applicable for districts and colleges, but I think the recruitment and application process that we implemented this year really just speaks to being really intentional about who you're partnering with, what are the strategies you're partnering around. So focusing on that, and then we're providing a continuous improvement framework. So being student informed, identifying a collective and measurable aim, and starting small and iterating. So we have resources around continuous improvement we're happy to share. And then lastly, just these are resources that we have currently. Leverage the resources that currently exist to be effective and useful with your time and energy. We have college transition checklists. So again, facilitating and supporting that handoff point from the district to the college. These are a really tangible tool to help with that. So that checklist, your college may have resources on that. And this is also a way to begin that conversation with them. College knowledge materials, our financial aid toolkit, we have Spanish materials, so things that already exist. And then we also did consolidate external COVID resources to create an easy landing page. So we do have COVID-19 resources on our website. All right, next slide. All right, so that's essentially what we have to share. You know, my last takeaway is this feels messy, but that's where we started with this. It wasn't a clear, precise process. We learned a lot as we did it. So if you have questions, you can reach out to me. My website's on the screen, and you can go to our website to learn more information as well. So thank you, everybody.
Great, thanks, Christian. One of the quick questions was, at what interval did you field the senior exit surveys?
Kind of like I mentioned before, it was different by district. And so there was coordination that needed to happen in working with the different districts. Some districts were doing a February exit survey and like an April or May exit survey so that they could measure the progress of their students. I'd say, if you don't have one out, right now is prime time to begin working on that. So you want to get it out early enough so that it's actionable and you're able to do something with that information that you collect.
Great. And then another, Carrie is asking if you wouldn't mind sharing some of the links now in the chat. I think you have to send those to me and then I send them to everyone, but that's fine. So while
I'll send those to you, Kathy.
Great. So as we turn the floor over to Carlo, so he can share his work, you can share the chat features. And Carlo, let me give you rights to control the keyboard here.
Fantastic.
Okay. Yeah, you're all set.
Great. Thanks so much, Kathy, and thanks so much, Bill. And good morning here from Los Angeles. My name's Carlos Silberger. I work for the Partnership for Los Angeles Schools, and I'm thrilled to be here to share a little bit about our intervention. I should mention before we start, this is new work for us at the Partnership. We got some funding from NCAN to do a pilot this past summer. And so we've just had 1 year of experience in this, but I'm hoping that since it's so new and since we built this during COVID, I'm hoping that I can share some of our work and some of our learnings and how we're sort of shifting as we go to year 2 in the coming months. So the Partnership for LA Schools, for those that aren't familiar, is a nonprofit organization that actually manages 19 LAUSD schools. And so we're sort of a unique organization in that we're a nonprofit, we're not a district, we're not a charter management organization, but we are working with district public schools as a school management organization. And our mission really has us working with the adults on campus to build capacity so that they can work more successfully with the students. And so it's an unusual thing for our organization to actually work directly with students, which is what we did with our summer melt intervention. But like I mentioned, because NCAN was interested in having us do this pilot, we said, you know what, this is an important thing. Let's give it a try. And we found a lot of real value there, and I'll share that with you as we move forward here. We work in 3 neighborhoods of Los Angeles: Watts, Boyle Heights, and South LA. And like I said, 19 schools, including 5 high schools, a high school graduating class of about 1,000 students, give or take, a little over 1,000 students. And those are 3 of the historically most under-resourced communities in Los Angeles, for those not familiar with our area. So a little bit of context. So when we first got this money, we looked at our data. That was the first thing we wanted to do, is to see like who actually needs support. And what we found is that of the students who told us that they're going to a UC, about 90% actually made it, looking at the NSC data. Of those who told us that they were going to a Cal State, about 78% made it, about 22% melted during the summer. And of the almost 1,000 students who were going, and this is over 2 years, by the way, this is the 2 years prior to this past year, who told us that they were matriculating to a community college, about 28% melted. And so we looked at this data and we said, wow, everyone needs support, obviously, but really UC students, private school students, they're making it. If we're going to need to focus our supports, we really should be focusing on those who are going to community college and Cal State, because that seems to be the areas in most need. Our district also did what they called summer melt support, but really what it was that they paid for counselors to do about 50 hours on campus. And we weren't finding a whole lot of impact from that, because really what most counselors did is set up like an office and said, hey, students, if you need my help, reach out. And so a couple students would reach out, but really we realized pretty early that that was only helping the already motivated students, and we needed to find a way to do more outreach directly to students without putting the onus on them. And then after we got this grant and started planning, of course, COVID hit. And so, you know, a lot of what we planned was impossible. A lot of schools were really not doing the kind of orientation that they were before. Of course, the economy took a hit, which affected students wanting to go to college, wanting to engage. All of that was sort of hit as we were building this program last year. So we came up with this idea that we're now calling Project Grad, Get Ready to Achieve Your Dreams. And this is sort of the goals that we set out, sort of the mission of our Summer Melt initiative. And I want to especially have you pay attention to the last 2 bullet points, because again, we couldn't do everything. So we were trying to think what really is the main area of focus. And what we found is that because we had such a small window, we were only doing our program from like the end of May to the end of July. we had two sort of things we had to get going to make it work. The first one is that we had to try to find a way of creating a community of support amongst the students going to the same college so that they could continue to support each other after our program was done. We didn't have the resource. This isn't a major part of our organization's work. We couldn't keep supporting them for 6 months or a year, but we felt like if we could bring a group of students together and create a community of support, then they would continue supporting each other even after our supports were done. And that we needed to really focus on the social emotional learning skills that they were going to need to succeed in college, giving them those advocacy skills and SEL skills that were going to help them be successful. The second big thing was that we wanted to make sure, especially in the midst of the COVID pandemic, when students really didn't feel comfortable on campus, weren't even going to campus, of course, and where a lot of the direct supports from colleges were not happening as much, we wanted students to feel like they knew the people on campus that they could reach out to when they needed help after our program was done. So we wanted to actually have them meet those people and hear from them and talk to them and know their name and know how to reach them and not have to do those extra steps.
Carlos, Anne asked if you could repeat the information about the number of counselor hours.
So LAUSD pays for about 50 hours, 50, per school for counselors to work during the summer, but they basically leave it up to the counselors how they want to use those 50 hours. And like I said, the majority of them just sort of are in their offices and tell the students, reach out if you need help.
Great,
it really
thanks.
it really wasn't, unfortunately, a real intervention. So with that in mind, a couple things about our intervention. The first thing, as I mentioned, we did cohorts by destination school. We said if we want students to be able to rely on each other, meet the people at their campus, it wasn't going to work to have 50 students all going to all different colleges. We needed to actually cohort students by this destination school, and we felt like we could only manage 4 cohorts with our staffing and our time. And so we picked our 2 highest destination community colleges, our 2 highest destination four-year colleges, and just focused on those students. Ended up with about 120 students who signed up, although some participated more than others. We decided we wanted these facilitated by near-peer advisors. We were lucky. We have a VISTA program, AmeriCorps VISTA program, with a few VISTAs who work in our schools building capacity around college-going culture during the year. And so we said, this is perfect. Let's have them really focus here. Most of them are about a year out of college. They know a lot about this and can facilitate these groups of students who can work together. And so that's, again, the way we're going to run it this year, with me supporting them, but them really doing a lot of the direct support for students. We tried really hard to create this community of support by day one, like I said. So a lot of it is just around building that relationship with each other and with the people on campus. We did do one-on-one contact. So we had, I should mention one other thing about the community of support. We used GroupMe. So everyone joined GroupMe and then they could ask each other questions. And so rather than it being like this one-way communication where our facilitators were sending out information or students were asking us, they were asking each other. And those GroupMe groups continued even after the intervention, where students all going to the same college can continue to engage and say, wait, what's due on the 1st? And people could ask, or I'm having trouble with my financial aid. Can somebody help me reach the right person at our campus? We did do some one-on-one contact, call and text. That was not a major part of our intervention. Most of that was more about trying to get people on those facilitated discussions so that they were interacting with each other. And like I said, we had campus level supports at each and every one of our sessions so that they were actually meeting people on campus who could continue to support them. With that in mind, these were the topics that we decided to prioritize. So team building, how to schedule classes, how to build a schedule to use your time wisely, how to get involved on campus. We brought in student leaders from their campus to meet them and talk about involvement, how to advocate for yourself and practicing advocating with professors, and then how to continue communication after this was done. So those are the kinds of skills we were hoping to build during this intervention. I seem to not be able to forward the slides, if you don't mind, Kathy. So a couple keys we learned and this is going to build on what you've already heard today, but one big one is building partnerships. I have a very small team here who's working on it. Like I said, we have AmeriCorps Vistas who are here for just a very short time running these programs. We were much stronger when we were in partnership with others. So we found other organizations in the community who were also doing summer melt and said, hey, you want to collaborate? Let's do this together. Some of them were able to support the students even after our program ended. A lot of them were able to help reach out to students, bring them in, help get resources on campus. So, and we didn't know if we were going to do this more than this one pilot year last year. So having 5 groups work together, way stronger than us doing this alone. And also building partnerships with universities. Again, this is going to build on what you've already heard this morning. But like all 4 of the universities, we reached out to them and they said, yes, we want to help you. We've reached out to them again this year. They said, yes, let's partner. They need help finding kids. We have kids. We need help finding resources. They are the people who have those resources. So the partnership with the universities was strong and very significant. I mentioned the near peer advisor. I think that's huge. And those individuals, knowing exactly what they needed in campus, knowing how to speak to students about this was really important. And then the biggest one is building student relationships early. May 1st is the SIR deadline, and we're going to be starting to reach out to students on May 2nd. And finding the kids who are going to these 4 campuses, meeting with them individually, signing them up. If we can build a relationship before the school year ends, we know we'll continue to support them over the summer. If we don't build those relationships, then there's no way we're going to be able to reach them after the summer. And I want to share with you the data because I think that's important. That's the way we measure it. Our summer melt data this past year, not as good as the year before. Our 4-year summer melt went from 11 to 13%, our 2-year from 18 to 28. Did our program help? Who knows? I really don't have a good answer to that, mostly because this past year was so unique because of COVID. We're hoping to do a cohort comparison to see if the students who participated in the program had better rates than the others, but we don't know yet. I did want to share a couple real quickly. I know I'm running out of time, but if you can go on to the next slide. We also did collect some survey data. And so you can see when we asked students beforehand, like, do they feel comfortable and prepared to seek help? Most people said somewhat, some said no. As you can see at the end, the numbers were many more people felt very prepared. And next slide. And then when we asked them to just put in words that described how they're feeling, you can see a lot of nervous on the front end, a lot of excited and confident on the second end. So I think that at least that qualitative data makes me feel a little bit more secure that at least it helped those students who were able to participate. And that's my contact information. Thanks so much for joining, and I'm happy to answer questions once we're done with the presentations.
Great, thanks so much, Carlo. And his email will also be on our question slide, folks, so we will come, you will have that opportunity to write his email down in case you want to contact him later. So with that, Jeremy, you officially have controls.
All right, well, thank you very much, and it's glad to be here. Talk to all you Floridians. I do have my University of Central Florida pennant back there. I'm a proud grad there, so it's great to chat with all of you, and great to hear from all these other partners too. I know I was scribbling down notes of ideas, and I think you'll hopefully see kind of through this that a lot of what we are doing is not unique. It's not new. It's we've looked at the same research everyone else here has done, and we've tried things and seen what other people are doing and tried to replicate it and make it happen. So just a bit of background about our district. We are in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is about the 6th biggest city in Pennsylvania. So a smaller city, about 60,000 people. We have about 12,000 students in our district. About 90% of students are free or reduced lunch. So certainly have a lot of barriers. We have a big refugee population in our community. And we have about 650 to 750 who enroll or who graduate every year. It's kind of our background. So let me just try and advance the slides here. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of the tools that we've developed. So we had started this work a couple years ago. It would have been the 17-18 school year or the 18-19 school year. We really identified a real need because we just had a lot of students experiencing summer melt. And we find, do a lot of work during the school year in ensuring students have really strong post-graduation plans. Because what we've found in the past is that we do those year-end surveys and students would say, oh yeah, I'm going to college, I'm doing this, but they haven't necessarily done a FAFSA, they haven't done a lot of those steps that they need to do, so that data wasn't always super valuable. So we did a lot of work on the front end to really make sure that data was meaningful. And we did some analysis with our partners at Franklin and Marshall College to try and predict which students were going to be most at risk of experiencing summer melt. So we did that. We ran through that data looking at our past years. What we found, I don't think was super surprising, but it's been really helpful for us. So we found the strongest predictors of melting over the summer is unweighted GPA, attendance, FAFSA completion, and enrollment, whether you paid an enrollment deposit. So, obviously FAFSA completion, I know NCAN's done a lot of research on that. If you don't do that, your chances of actually enrolling are going to be low, whether you pay that deposit, likewise. But the GPA and attendance piece has been really interesting too, and I think has shown kind of some of those habits. So if you look at the right-hand side, you can see this is kind of, this spits out this formula, basically, this regression formula. So we can plug in these demographic data and this data, and it'll tell us how likely that student is to actually show up in the fall. So we have a student at the top row there. They've done their FAFSA, they've done their FIA, which is our state application for aid. They've confirmed enrollment. They've done those steps, but their academic profile is very, very low. So their likelihood of enrollment, when you look at our past data, is pretty low as well. So that's a student who's going to a community college where our melt rates are higher, and they have a lower GPA, a lower attendance rate. So we've used this to guide kind of two things. So first is our spring advising. So we share this out with our counselors, our advising staff, and this is solely staff facing. It's not student facing, because we don't want to tell them, hey, we think this is the likelihood you're going to show up in the fall, but we use it to drive conversations. So for that student in that first line, it's saying, hey, you've done everything, that's great, you have a good plan. You really want to make sure though, in high school, your attendance rate hasn't been that great. Your academics have been a little lower. These are the things you're going to really need to change if you want to be successful in the fall, in college, and we want to make sure that you're on track. And it's also really guided our summer outreach as well. So in the summer, let me just go to the next slide here. In the summer, we utilize this list to really target our outreach. So we know, kind of like Carlo mentioned about, we have students going to four-year schools who are, really high GPAs, that we know like the likelihood of them going is really, really high. So those are the students that don't need necessarily as much support. So instead, we can target those students that are maybe less likely or kind of in the middle and target our outreach to them. So we do a lot of kind of one-on-one outreach to them, utilizing signal bind text messaging, meetings, phone calls, and we've really tried to develop a system to capture them and their information. So certainly, I know Carlo, I think, mentioned about having students information before they graduate. That's been huge for us. So really, at any point during the school year, nudging them to sign up for text messaging to get us their information, that's been huge, because once they graduate, it's just so hard to track them down. So really in the summer then, our staff, which we have about 4 staff, which includes myself over the summer, doing this and a lot of other things, are reaching out to those students to try and confirm their plans, help them with those steps. And if you see in the bottom here, these are, we work off of just a Google Sheet kind of collectively, which from a management side for myself is really helpful to see kind of a snapshot of where everyone is, and we can track, what of those things have students done in the summer to make sure they transition successfully. So some of that we gather through surveys with students. So it's saying, hey, have you done these financial aid and tuition timelines? Have you done these registration steps? And making sure they do that. Another thing we did this past year with COVID has certainly thrown a lot of this work off and changed it. So, we learned from our partners around us. So I remember NCAN put up a great post about how Puget Sound had put together these great transition checklists, and we said, hey, that sounds great. So we created one for our students as well, and that's something that we've kind of learned from them and have taken and tried to do something as well, and that's been a great resource. just like everyone else has mentioned, higher ed partnerships has been really, really key for us. So we have done some, and we're planning to do more of these this year, on-campus mini orientations. So these are opportunities for our students to come together to learn about that campus as a cohort and kind of bond together and know what those resources are. And then the college can actually pull those students individually, and they can say, hey, student XYZ, here's the things that you still need to do to make sure you're set for the fall. Through some funding that we have through NCAN, we're going to be able to incentivize students to participate in that this year and do some kind of near peer mentoring where graduates from those colleges who are also our high school graduates from our district are going to kind of partner with them to make sure they transition successfully. And we found that successful because the ROI for the college is really strong because they've got them almost there. So spending a couple bucks on food or supplies or incentives, they're willing to do because they want to get them kind of to that last step. We've worked with we have a small staff here in the summer who are stretched with a lot of different responsibilities. So we worked with our partners. So we're able to get a intern from our local college who's able to do a lot of that kind of individual outreach and tracking down those students, which is really, really helpful. And I want to stress, I think, each of us on this call have really hit regular communication and data sharing are huge. So, we can't work in silos. So working with our college partners is absolutely crucial. And we have found that many of our partners are willing to share information about students and where they are in their process. So they're, and there's things we got to be careful around with FERPA, certainly, but they have been willing to say, hey, we're working with this student and we haven't heard from them about, confirming their deposit, or, we haven't, we're trying to get a response from them on orientation. And then because we have that connection from them on the high school side, we can follow up about next steps. So that's incredibly beneficial, highly recommend, is really important. And then one event that we've done that we just find is a lot of fun and really beneficial is a college send-off. So every year in August, we typically, and in the top right, doing this now would give me anxiety, having all these students together, but we bring our students together, do an event, feed them, get them luggage, school supplies, headed off into college. And the benefit is obviously bringing them together, making sure that they're set for their next step, but it's also another connection point, a point where we can make sure they have everything checked off on their list. We can kind of prompt them to sign up for support services and things like that. And this past year, we had to do this in more of a drive-up option. So you can see on the bottom, that's what our students came by and did a socially distant version. So we have found, in the first year we did this and we really were intentional about it. We were able to reduce our summer melt rate by about 10%, which we felt good about, but we still recognize there's a lot of need still remaining. I think some of that was we were more intentional on the front end about identifying which kids are actually going to college. So not just saying, yes, I'm going to go, but you haven't done a thing. Say, counselors being intentional of identifying, kind of looking through that list of students and say, okay, they say that, but they haven't done anything to indicate that up to this point, being intentional. And some of that is those interventions as well.
Great. I think we're moving to questions now. So Jeremy, thank you for that. Getting a bunch of questions coming in through the chat. Let's see, how did they identify which students are really going to college? Jeremy, I think that one was for you.
Yeah, so the more of that's been kind of working with the counselors individually and making sure kind of throughout the school year that we have kind of a centralized tracking system to track the quality of our seniors' plans. So I send out biweekly reports to counselors of saying like, hey, this kid says they're going to college and they haven't done anything, so that we have those conversations earlier. And then we kind of know at the end, before students do that survey, we can kind of reach out to them individually and kind of get a better idea of like what actually is your plan. Because our students change what they want to do a lot. So I think it's just being intentional about regularly asking them and tracking them down and trying to find out that information. So it's certainly not an exact science, but we found that to be helpful in because we don't want to kind of waste efforts in the summer and valuable like capital in tracking down students that really aren't planning on doing that.
Can I jump in, Kathy?
Yeah, please.
I heard the Jeremy. Thank you for your perspective on that side. I heard the question a different way, which was how do you verify which students have actually enrolled? You know, the kind of the gold standard for that in the field, I think, is the National Student Clearinghouse's Student Tracker service. If you don't know about the National Student Clearinghouse, they cover about 98% of the post-secondary enrollments nationally, and they have a service that districts, high schools, community-based organizations can sign up for, where you submit a list of students and then they send back a match of, you know, of what students' post-secondary enrollments are. The service, I think, is really invaluable. Right now, it's about $595 per high school per year. And when you think about the time and effort it would take to track down individually those post-secondary enrollments in terms of staff time, I tend to think the cost benefit there is well worth it. So if you are not familiar with the Student Tracker, you know, please do try to run that down.
Yeah, great plug. Another quick question for Jeremy. Has there been any resistance from your counselor team to looking at the data and changing program services based on it?
Yes. Yes, they definitely has. So I've been in this role about four and a half years now, and it was a new position, kind of started by the superintendent to kind of, you know, coordinate things a little better. So there definitely was resistance at first. I don't feel like there's as much resistance now. I think the only pushback is really around time and saying, like, I think they just wish they had more time to devote to this, and they're so overwhelmed, certainly with COVID-19, of dealing with all the social emotional needs of our students. So it's kind of like, you know, when can we do this? We haven't faced as much pushback around the summer melt work because, you know, counselors typically are not there in the summer. They are not the ones doing it. We have other staff who are able to do that. But yeah, it's certainly been a process to get there, and required a lot of discussion and conversations and learning from them. I mean, they know a ton and have a lot of resources to share. So it's been a kind of ongoing process.
Great. Christian, we have a couple of requests for the links that you shared, so we'll be sure to send those out with the key takeaways and with the slides and recordings, so folks will make sure you get those. So I got a couple of questions on this. If you had limited funds, what do you feel is the best use of funds in terms of making the biggest difference? So Carla, why don't we start with you?
So, you know, I mean, our model, like I mentioned, is really around creating that community of support and students meeting each other and learning how to advocate for themselves. And the costs there are, you know, pretty minimal. I mean, we're paying a small amount for some staff, but there isn't a whole lot more that it costs other than time, obviously. So, you know, the grant from NCAN was, I think, if I remember correctly, $10,000, and that's what ran that program last year. So we're not talking about an enormous amount of money to help hundreds of students. So that's, to me, would be the place I would start.
Okay, great. Christian, anything you would add to that?
A couple things come to mind. Anything to increase your own capacity, whether that's building a website, building resources or tools that can make your life or students' life easier. Also, another thing we hear about is the challenges around student engagement. So even if those funds are used for food or whatever it may be to help support that engagement, that's just a consistent theme and challenge that we hear about.
Yeah. Bill, I'm going to start with you. Susan's asking, what tools do you use to collect senior data throughout the year to determine who has applied?
That is a good question. So, you know, districts have all kinds of different school information systems, right? There's a variety of platforms out there. You know, Naviance is probably one of the biggest ones, but certainly not the only one. I think the most important thing here, right, is just making sure that in terms of collecting that data, that you have fields to put that information, right? That you have flags about enrollment, you have flags about whether applications are started and to which institutions, and you have status indicators for all those fields. I don't think there's a silver bullet in terms of the specific platform that districts and schools use, although maybe our panelists have kind of more insight into that. I think it's just more a function of being intentional about what kinds of questions am I going to want to answer out of the data, and do I have appropriate places to store that data so that when the time comes, I can pull it out easily.
Yeah. Jeremy, anything you'd add to that?
I would just add, kind of going back to like the pushback question around data. I mean, our biggest thing was having a central place where everyone was tracking it. So we built we don't use Naviance, but we use Zello, which is kind of a similar platform, and we track all of our students' data in our school information system, and we kind of built something custom out of it, because previously every counselor was tracking something on their own spreadsheet. So we wanted to be able to say, okay, we have Millersville University is having this opportunity. We want to pull every student who's interested in that school and push something out. So having everyone speaking the same language and tracking it in the same spot has been extremely beneficial. And it took some time and some cost to build that capacity, not a ton, but that's provided incredible benefits for those those kind of actionable things we can do that come out of that.
Wonderful. So when you all are thinking about you're working with students or your teams are working with students, I think this challenge was even more so during COVID, which is looking for strategies on how to help students understand the value of education versus going straight to work, particularly in a part-time job. This was a tough year, and in many cases it wasn't just the students, it was their families needing help. And so how do you create this value proposition of a longer term gain that may cause some nearer term challenges? So Bill, you want to start with you? Any thoughts on that front?
I have some. I'm not sure how encouraging they are. I mean, we don't want to scare students. We don't want to make them nervous, but I think there is there's value to talking about kind of the economic benefits of post-secondary attainment, right? And showing at each marginal level of post-secondary pathway how there are lifetime kind of gains, economic gains, but not just purely economic gains, right? I mean, there are other kinds of health, civic kind of benefits that come along with post-secondary attainment. The piece that I think is also valuable, and it's not the most optimistic conversation, but it's one that is realistic, is looking at the data about how often students who take time after high school don't return for a post-secondary pathway, right? That life happens, right? That you get a job, that you start a family, that you have other demands of your time. There's research out there that taking time, having a gap between high school and post-secondary enrollment greatly reduces the likelihood of eventual post-secondary attainment. And having that knowledge in hand, I think, is something that we should just be honest about with students as they consider their pathways.
Yeah, great. Okay. Carlo, anything you want to add to that before we close out?
Yeah, thank you. I agree completely with what Bill said. And one thing I didn't share before, but we actually start our summer melt intervention with a session for students and their families together. And so I would say everything that Bill just mentioned, I would suggest sharing when both students and families are on the same Zoom together and can talk about those things. Otherwise, you're sharing something with students and then they're going to talk to their parents and getting a totally different view. And all of a sudden, we're working against each other instead of learning together.
Great. I know FCAN's created a top 5 reasons to complete your FAFSA. There is some case making data in that. So if you don't have that, that is on our website under our FAFSA challenge page. So please feel free to seek that out. We got another plug for the checklist. I will be sure to share a link to Christian's checklist in the show notes. So no worries there. Susan will take care of you. With that, just want to encourage you, if you are not already a subscriber to Florida collegeaccess.org's subscription list. I encourage you to do so, where we'll keep you up to date on upcoming webinars, briefings, legislative updates, and all the other good stuff we're working on. And with that, we're at 2 o'clock. So many thanks to Bill, Christian, Carlo, and Jeremy for helping us understand how to keep students on track so they don't melt this summer, this year more than ever. I know we're tired of hearing that statement, but it's true. COVID's creating unique challenges. So thank you to everyone for joining us today. Have a great day and stay safe out there. Take care.